Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about how the equipment that we have will impact what accessory movements that we do. And by accessory movements, what do I mean? Lifts that are not direct variations of competitive lifts, right? Something that no one is really going to compete on in a competitive environment, or a close variation of that. Accessory movements, meaning stuff that we're doing for general hypertrophy or to train basic movement patterns. In this case, like me doing a good morning up above. Right, that's a supplemental lift. Even though it's something that I train very, very seriously and train it hard, it is a supplemental lift. And we do need to keep in mind, we need to train our supplemental lifts very, very hard. If you're not going to, there's no point in even bothering with them. So using some of this as an example so that you guys can extrapolate this to your own training to some extent, I'll just show you guys something that I do different. Now, you guys know I have always been big on Pendlay rows. I prescribe them for all my clients, and I have been doing Pendlay rows with my axle bar for quite a while. And I'll work some of the footage in here, and it's always a reminder because I have that come up when I make these videos. People say, well, what do you mean you don't do a lift anymore? It's right there in the video. It's like, right, that doesn't mean that it was filmed this week, right? It means that if the timing of this video is made, we're no longer using an exercise. Doesn't mean I didn't train an exercise for 17 years. So let's come over to the point with that. I'm big on Pendlay rows. However, due to my own current equipment and the stuff I have available and what I'm training, I've kind of said very recently, and by recently, I mean 24 hours before I'm making this video, which might be a month before this video comes out, that I don't need Pendlay rows in my current rotation. Now, when I say something like that, a lot of people out there might say, does that mean that I don't need Pendlay rows? No, you probably do still need Pendlay rows. But for an example, in my case, I do really challenging sets of good mornings twice a week. I also have the reverse hyperextension, which I train very, very hard. In fact, I have very specific performance goals on that device. And I venture to say that I push that device harder than 99% of people who use one. And I think that's a fair statement because I see what other people do with it. And I'm doing that at the instruction of another really good coach out there who said, yeah, you should do that. So I'm taking someone else's advice. And so because of that, I look at it and say, okay, what is our benefit of something like the Pendlay row over my inverted rows? Well, part of it was that, well, I didn't have the axle bar. Well, I can use the axle bar on the inverted rows, right? I get all the grip training I want. And it works the upper back slightly better than my Pendlays do, just due to the range of motion and the way I do it. I can focus a little more on things like the rear delts, mid traps and everything, rhomboids a little more than the lats. Not that all of that doesn't get worked on any type of row, but I would look at it and say, well, what is one of the other big benefits of the Pendlay row? Why is it so special? Well, it helps us deadlift, and it helps us build isometric strength for deadlifting and other stuff because we have to isometrically contract the posterior chain while doing it. None of that's being used on these chest-supported rows. Well, in my case, I look at it and say, well, I don't need any more posterior chain work. Why? Because I am pushing good mornings and reverse hypers so hard and with so much training volume that my entire lower back and glutes and everything are pretty fatigued every week. I actually, without the rows, I probably train these things more than most lifters I know. There are exceptions. I'm not saying more than everyone I know, more than most lifters I know. I have all my bases covered. Okay? Any benefit I would get from doing the rows is so blown out of the water by doing all this reverse hypers that I don't necessarily need it. I can get complete posterior chain development to an extreme degree with the other stuff that I'm doing. Most people aren't doing that, right? I'm doing 10 heavy sets of 25. Like even there, I've got 380 pounds on there, sets of 25. I'm doing 10 sets of those a week. I'm pushing the limits on 10 rep sets on good mornings, right? All that's covered. So I have to look at it and say, are pendlay rows at this point just interfering with my recovery? Are they just interfering with my recovery? And I would argue possibly yes in this juncture. Now I need the grip training from the axle bar, but we can do inverted rows with the axle bar. But the inverted rows in a more supported position, right? We're hanging. No real work being done or stress really being placed on my posterior chain or low back really. And I'm trying to focus on doing more exercises that put it in traction. Look at the way I train these days, right? I have the equipment to do a hip belt squat, puts my hips in traction. I do tons of the reverse hypers. And by the way, I do the reverse hyper on off days too with just lighter weight. I don't put 380 on it. I put like 200 on it, 180, something in that range. Just for restoration, okay? So we're concerned with low back recovery at this point in the game. It would be a little different. If I was a 500-pound deadlifter, and a 400-pound squatter, it might be a little bit different. Who didn't have the reverse hyper? But I do. And so therefore, I have to structure my supplemental work around that. And that's what I mean as an example. We have to pick our best supplemental lifts based upon what we have available. And everyone has different equipment available. So just like people say, well, hey, what do you recommend for someone with a chest weakness on their bench? I'm like, well, it really depends on what you have, what you're comfortable doing. My 3 go-to movements are generally going to be dumbbell chest presses. Okay, right? Dips, floor press. I think those are some of the best chest builders out there for that are going to be specific to increasing your bench and things also. Would I necessarily say dumbbells would always be the first choice if someone has a bow bar? Maybe not, if they just want the extra range of motion of dumbbells. But that could be hard on the shoulders. I might recommend dips over dumbbells in many cases, but if you want to get really high reps and you can't do enough dips, it may not work. Dumbbells might be the better tool, but in a lot of cases, dips might be the best tool. Or if you don't have access to dipping bars, but you have access to dumbbells, well, you're gonna do the dumbbells instead. The idea is the same. You still have more of a neutral grip that you can do, and a longer range of motion in the bench press allows to get a better stretch on the chest. Right? We work with the equipment that we have. Not everyone has dumbbells. Not everyone has specialty bars. Not everyone has bands and chains. Therefore, what we do for our different lifts will vary. It's going to vary depending upon the equipment that you have. And what happens when someone has a reverse hyperextension, a glute ham raise, and a hip belt squat at their gym? Well, their training and their supplemental work is going to look dramatically different than someone who goes to a box gym, even running a very similar program, even if they have the same weak links. Okay, so if you took the same person, and so let's say you're a given lifter, if you change gyms with completely different equipment, you're going to use different supplemental lifts because you still have to balance everything around your needs versus the equipment that you have at your disposal. Okay? And if you have certain equipment at your disposal, certain lifts are going to have more value than others. Some lifts are going to have more value than others depending on what you have available. So my training might look very, very different from yours in terms of picking my lifts. Why? Because I have a wide variety of specialty bars. I have all this strength-specific stuff. I have all these different bars, bands, chains, reverse hyper, glute ham raise. I don't have dumbbells. So for someone else who was trying to run even similar programming to me, even if they had similar weak points that I do, they might use a lot more dumbbells. They might use a lot more dumbbells in their commercial gym versus what I do because I don't have them. I don't really use them. I have a pair of 25s. And they may not have all this other specialty equipment that I have. So their training is going to look a lot different, even with the same basic programming. Because the equipment that we have available will largely dictate our supplemental work. Okay, and it's always going to be that way. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.